I need you to stay with me for a moment. Because what I'm about to tell you is not something I can explain logically. And if I had not lived through it myself, I probably would not believe it either. There was a moment when I was lying on the ground, unable to move, completely aware, but trapped inside my own body. People were screaming my name. Fatima, Fatima. But I couldn't answer them. Not because I didn't want to, but because I physically couldn't. And in that moment, something terrifying entered my mind. A thought I had never allowed before. What if this is it? What if I never walk again? My name is Fatima Osman. And what happened to me in that hospital room did not just change my body. It changed everything I believed about God, about life, about truth itself. And I need to tell you this story carefully, because if I don't, you might miss the one thing that could change your life the way it changed mine. I grew up in a small city in the north of Egypt, not far from Alexandria. It wasn't a place people dream about moving to, but it was a place people belonged. You knew your neighbors. You knew the shopkeepers. You knew the smell of bread in the morning before you even opened your eyes. Life was simple, not easy, but warm. My father was a deeply religious man, not harsh, not cruel, but very firm in what he believed. Faith, in our home, was not optional. It was structure. It was identity. It was everything. We prayed. We fasted. We followed the rules. We didn't question. And I followed. Not because I was forced, but because it was all I had ever known. My mother was different. Quiet. Gentle. She didn't speak much, but you felt her love in everything she did. The way she prepared food. The way she sat beside you when you were sick. The way she noticed things no one else noticed. I was the only daughter, which meant something very specific in our home. Responsibility, expectation, pressure, but also opportunity. My father wanted me educated, and for that, I will always respect him. I worked hard, very hard. I studied engineering in Alexandria. At first, it was just numbers, equations, calculations. But slowly, it became something else. Control. Because in engineering, everything has an answer. Everything can be solved if you think hard enough. And I liked that. I liked knowing that if something was broken, I could fix it. I graduated. I got a job at a construction company. I returned home. And from the outside, my life looked exactly right. Stable job. Respectable position. Faithful daughter. Good Muslim woman. Everything looked right. But inside, there was something I never talked about. Something I didn't even allow myself to fully think about. A quiet emptiness. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just there. Like something was missing. But I couldn't name what it was. And because I couldn't explain it, I ignored it. Until the day I couldn't ignore anything anymore. It was a Thursday morning. Late November. I remember because Thursdays were meeting days. And I had barely slept the night before. Calculations. Corrections. Numbers that refused to settle. I was tired. Not normal tired. Deep tired. But I went to work anyway. Because that's what you do. We were working on a large building project. Several floors. Concrete structure. That morning, my task was simple. Routine. Inspect the upper level. Check the concrete. Confirm stability. I had done it many times before. Nothing unusual. Nothing dangerous. I put on my helmet, my vest, and I climbed, step by step, up to the third floor. I remember the wind slightly stronger up there. I remember the unfinished edges, the open space, and then, nothing. I don't remember the fall. One moment I was standing. The next moment, everything was gone. They told me later what happened. A platform, not secured properly. A mistake. A small mistake, with massive consequences. It gave way beneath me, and I fell. When I woke up, I knew something was wrong immediately. The ground felt cold, hard, broken. There was dust everywhere, voices everywhere. But my body was not responding. I tried to move. Nothing. I tried again. Nothing. And I need you to understand this moment, because this is where everything started to change. When your body stops responding, you don't just feel fear, you feel loss. Because something you have trusted your entire life suddenly disappears. Control, gone. I lay there, fully awake, fully aware, completely helpless. And for the first time in my life, I realized something I had never considered before. I was not in control of anything. When they lifted me into the ambulance, I remember looking up, but everything felt distant. The sky, the faces, the voices. It was like I was there, but not fully there. I kept trying to move my legs, again, and again, and again. Nothing. And with every failed attempt, the fear grew louder. Not panic. Not yet. Something deeper. A quiet terror that sat in my chest and refused to leave. At the hospital, everything moved fast. Doctors, nurses, questions, machines, hands touching me, voices speaking over me. But I could barely process any of it, because my focus was on one thing: move. I was telling my legs to move. They didn't. They ran tests, scans, x-rays, and then came the words that changed everything. We are concerned about spinal injury. Concerned. That word sounds calm, but what it really means is, we don't know. And not knowing is one of the hardest things to live with. The first 3 days felt like a lifetime. Pain filled my body. Sharp, constant, unforgiving. But the physical pain was not the worst part. The worst part was the uncertainty. Would I walk again? Would I live like this forever? Would my life, as I knew it, be over? My mother stayed by my side. Always. She sat in the chair beside my bed, holding my hand, quietly crying. Not loud, not dramatic, just silent tears that said everything. My father stood near the door, praying, whispering under his breath. The same man who had always been strong, always certain, now looked helpless. And that scared me more than anything. Because if he didn't have answers, then who did? People came and went. Relatives, friends, visitors. They spoke words of encouragement. You will be fine. Be strong. Have faith. But inside, I felt alone. Completely alone. Because none of them were inside my body. None of them felt what I felt. None of them heard the silence. When I tried to move, days passed, and I did what I had always been taught to do. I prayed. I prayed the way I always had. The words I had memorized. The structure I had followed since childhood. I asked Allah to heal me, to take the pain away, to let me walk again. And then, I waited. Not for a miracle, just for something. A feeling, a sign, a sense of peace, something to tell me I was not alone. But nothing came. The ceiling looked the same. The pain stayed the same. The fear stayed the same. And the emptiness, the one I had ignored for years, grew louder, because now, I had nothing to distract me from it. No work, no movement, no control, just me, and my thoughts. And for the first time, I could not silence them. Weeks later, they moved me to a rehabilitation ward. A different room, different patients, same uncertainty. I was placed near a window. And strangely, that small detail mattered. Because at least I could see something, changing. The sky, the light, the passing of time. Across from me was a woman, older, calm. Her name was Hannah. I noticed her immediately, not because she spoke loudly, or tried to get attention, but because she had something I didn't. Peace. Real peace. Even in pain. Even when she struggled to move. Even when therapy made her wince. And sometimes cry. She didn't complain. And that confused me. Because I was struggling. Inside and out. And she was steady. I saw a small cross around her neck. And a book. A Bible. She read it every morning. Every evening. Consistently. At first, I ignored her. I didn't want conversations. I didn't want people. I was tired. But she didn't force anything. She just existed. Smiling sometimes. Humming quietly. Making small comments to nurses. And slowly, without me choosing it, I started watching her. Because something about her didn't make sense. How could someone in pain be at peace? One night, everything shifted. The ward was quiet. Lights dim. Most people asleep. But I couldn't sleep. And neither could she. Then, from across the room, she spoke. Softly. Fatima, how are you holding up? Simple question. But something about the way she said it broke something inside me. Because she wasn't asking politely. She was asking, like she already knew the answer. And I couldn't pretend anymore. I told her the truth. I'm scared. The words came out before I could stop them. Not just about walking, but something deeper. Something I couldn't fully explain. She listened. Didn't interrupt. Didn't correct. And then she said something I will never forget. That kind of fear is different, isn't it? I looked at her. She continued. It's not just your body, it's something deeper. And in that moment, I realized something. She understood. Not the situation, but the feeling. And that was enough to open the door. We talked that night. Quietly. Slowly. And for the first time since the accident, I didn't feel completely alone. That night, something opened inside me. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. But quietly. Like a door that had always been there. And I had just noticed it for the first time. After I told Hannah I was scared, we sat in silence for a few seconds. Not awkward silence, but the kind of silence where something real is about to be said. Then she spoke. Fear like that doesn't come from nowhere. Her voice was calm, gentle. It usually comes when something deeper is being shaken. I didn't answer immediately, because I knew she was right. This wasn't just about my legs. This wasn't just about an accident. This was something deeper. Something inside me that had been there for years, but now had nowhere to hide. So I asked her a question. Not planned. Not prepared. Just honest. How are you? So calm. She smiled slightly. Not in a way that made her look proud, but in a way that felt peaceful. And then she said something that stayed with me long after that conversation ended. I wasn't always like this. That got my attention, because I assumed she had always been this way, calm, steady, unshaken, but she shook her head gently. There was a time in my life, she said slowly, when everything fell apart, and she began to tell me her story, not rushed, not dramatic, just real. She told me about a season in her life, when she lost almost everything at once. Her marriage ended. Her job disappeared. One of her children became seriously ill. She said it felt like standing in the middle of a road, with everything crashing toward her, and no way to escape. And then she said something that made me sit up inside myself. That's when Jesus became real to me. I felt something shift immediately, because that name was not unfamiliar to me, but it was not comfortable either. I had heard about Jesus growing up. We respected him. We acknowledged him. But from a distance, he was a prophet, nothing more. And suddenly, here was this woman, talking about him, like she knew him, not believed in him, knew him. I didn't interrupt her. I didn't argue. I just listened. She continued. I had believed in God my whole life, she said softly, but I didn't know him. That sentence hit something inside me, because I didn't know if I could say I knew him either. I followed. I obeyed. I practiced, but knew him. I wasn't sure. She looked at me and said something very simple. When everything fell apart, I stopped performing, and I started asking honestly. I felt my chest tighten slightly, because I knew exactly what she meant. She told me that she had reached a point where she had nothing left to rely on, no strength, no answers, no control, and in that place, she cried out to Jesus. Not formally, not religiously, just honestly. And she said, everything changed. Not her circumstances. Those took time. But inside her, something shifted immediately. Peace. Real peace. The kind she now carried with her. Even in pain. Even in that hospital bed. I listened to all of it, carefully. And then I asked her the question that had been forming in my mind. How do you know it's real? There was no hesitation. She looked at me with complete certainty and said, because it didn't just comfort me. It changed me. That answer went deeper than I expected. Because comfort, I understood. Comfort is temporary, but change is real. She continued. The direction of my life changed completely. I became someone I wasn't before. And that didn't come from me. Silence filled the room again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was full of questions. Questions I wasn't ready to answer, but couldn't ignore anymore. That night, I didn't sleep much. I stared at the ceiling, thinking, replaying everything she said. And one thought kept returning, over and over again. What if? What if there is something I don't know? What if what I've been feeling all these years is pointing somewhere? The next morning, I noticed something. Hannah was reading again. That same book. The Bible. She read it slowly, carefully, like it mattered. Like it wasn't just a book. And for the first time, I felt something unexpected. Curiosity. Not resistance. Not fear. Curiosity. Later that day, I asked her about it. What do you read in there? She didn't react with excitement. She didn't try to convince me. She simply held it out slightly, and said, it's where I met him. That sentence caught me off guard. Met him. In a book? but something inside me leaned closer instead of pulling away. She opened it, flipped a few pages, and said, "If you ever want to read, start with the book of John. Just read it like someone is trying to introduce themselves to you." Introduce themselves. That wording stayed with me, because it changed how I saw it. Not as information, but as a person. She handed me a small Bible, worn, used, the pages soft from time, marked, underlined. This was not decoration. This was something she lived with. I took it, slowly, almost carefully, like it carried weight, and in a way, it did. I placed it beside my bed, and for the next 4 days, I didn't touch it, not because I forgot, but because I couldn't ignore what it might mean, because deep down, I knew something. If I opened it, and found something real, I would have to make a decision, and decisions like that are not easy. So I waited, looked at it sometimes, thought about it, pushed it away, until one night, everything changed. That night, everything felt different. I don't know how to explain it properly, but it was like the silence in the room was no longer empty. It felt full, not loud, not overwhelming, just present. I had been lying there for hours, looking at the ceiling, thinking, fighting my own thoughts, and eventually, I couldn't ignore it anymore. That small Bible was still in the drawer beside my bed. I knew it was there. I had known it was there for days, and something inside me kept pulling me toward it, not forcing me, not rushing me, just waiting. So slowly, I reached over, opened the drawer, and took it out. My hands were slightly shaking, not from fear exactly, but from something deeper, like I knew this moment mattered. I opened it, carefully, and turned to the book Hannah had mentioned, John. I didn't rush. I read slowly, line by line, and at first, it felt unfamiliar, different from anything I had read before. But then something began to happen. The more I read, the more it didn't feel like I was reading information. It felt like I was meeting someone, a person, Jesus, not distant, not unreachable, close. He spoke to people directly. He saw them. He understood them. He didn't avoid broken people. He moved toward them, and that confused me, because that was not how I had imagined God. I kept reading, night after night, slowly, sometimes stopping, just to think, sometimes reading the same lines again, because something about them stayed with me, and then I reached a moment that I will never forget. It was the shortest line, simple. Jesus wept. I stopped completely. I stared at those 2 words, over and over again. Jesus wept. God weeping. Not distant, not untouched, but feeling, present, moved by human pain. And something inside me broke open, because I realized something I had never understood before. If this is who he is, then he sees me, not just my body, not just my situation, but me, fully. And that thought stayed with me until one night, everything changed. It had been about 6 weeks since the accident. My body was slowly improving, very slowly, but my focus was no longer on my body. Something else was happening. That night, I was lying awake again. The room was quiet. Hannah was asleep. The other patients were silent. And then, I felt it. Something I had never felt before. Not outside me. Inside. A presence. I froze. not in fear, but in awareness, because I knew I was not alone. There was no sound, no movement, but I could feel it, clear, real, and then, deep inside, not in my ears, but in a place beyond my thoughts, I felt the words, I have been here all along. Everything stopped. Time, thought, fear, all of it, because in that moment, I knew something, not guessed, not imagined, knew. Jesus was real, not a story, not an idea, real, and he was there, with me, in that hospital room. I didn't think, I didn't analyze, I didn't question, I just responded. I started crying, not quietly, not carefully, but deeply, from a place inside me that had been closed for years, and I whispered, with everything I had left, Jesus. My voice broke. I don't know everything. I don't understand everything. But if you are real, I need you. Silence. But not empty silence. Full silence. And in that moment, something happened that I cannot fully explain. The emptiness that I had carried my entire life was gone. Not reduced. Not hidden. Gone. And in its place was something I had never experienced before. Peace. Real peace. Not emotional. Not temporary. Steady. Unshaken. And I knew everything had changed. Not around me, but inside me. The next morning, I looked at the room, and it was the same. Same walls. Same bed. Same situation. But I was not the same. The fear was gone. The weight was gone. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to hold everything together, because I wasn't empty anymore. That morning, I told Hannah everything, and she didn't act surprised. She just smiled, with tears in her eyes, and said, I was waiting for this. Days passed, weeks passed, and that peace never left, even when I struggled, even when therapy was painful. It stayed, constant, real. I began to recover, slowly. Movement returned, step by step, and the doctors were surprised. But the biggest miracle was not my legs, it was my heart, because I had spent my entire life trying to fill something I couldn't name, and now it was filled. When I left that hospital, I didn't walk out as the same person. I walked out changed, and yes, it cost me something. My family struggled to understand. Some relationships became difficult. Some people walked away. But even in that, the peace stayed. And that is how I knew this was real. So if you are watching this right now, and something inside you feels stirred, don't ignore it. Maybe you feel empty. Maybe you feel tired. Maybe you are doing everything right and still feel nothing. I know that feeling. I lived it. But I'm telling you, there is something real. His name is Jesus. You don't need perfect words. You don't need a perfect life. Just be honest. Even if your voice shakes, say, Jesus, if you are real, I need you. And give him space to respond. And listen. Before you leave this video, if this story touched you, don't ignore that. Someone else out there feels exactly the way you feel. So take a moment, like this video, so it can reach someone who needs it. And if you have ever experienced something like this, or you are searching right now, write it in the comments. Your story might be the answer someone else is praying for. And if you want more real stories, not performance, not empty religion, but real encounters, subscribe. Because what happened to me was not just a story. It was an encounter. And maybe your moment is closer than you think. Jesus is still real. He is still calling. And he is still answering. Even now. Even you.